Hi, this is Odeean. Today I've got the 18-inch Gipsy Danger from Pacific Rim. Here's the box. Let me just detach my camera here for a second. You can see it's really huge. Doesn't fit good in this light tent. I didn't buy any other Pacific Rim figures from Neca because of the pretty abysmal reviews I've been seeing of them. But this guy was just so big that I couldn't pass up the opportunity to have a huge robot like this. The back of the box shows Gipsy Danger in a kind of dynamic pose, well as dynamic as you can get this huge guy to stand. I think it's an actual product picture because it looks very much like the toy once you get it open, with a little bit of artistic license taken down here on the swishes of ocean. Because Gipsy Danger is so huge, it's a little bit hard to do it justice in my tent here, so I'm going to stick to mainly close-ups like this. And really that's why I bought the figure, because the weathering and detail show through better on this really huge scale. Now, I've got a few Neca figures, and most of them, in my opinion at least, are pretty rough figures. I don't hold them in such high esteem as some of my Japanese stuff. But they do make figures at a pretty decent price, which is something. I got this guy for $85 on BBTS. The shipping really added quite a lot to that because he's big and huge, but that wasn't unexpected. But it did I think, cost me close to $150 by the time I got it shipped. But I feel pretty happy with the purchase, so I'm not complaining. Now, there's a light gimmick. If I can just find the switch, you'll see that his nuclear reactor at the front turns on. It looks pretty good. There was supposed to be another white LED in the top here, but it won't stay on. It's become defective. Looking more closely at the face, you can see that the visor is a see-through piece of plastic, and on the back of that is what I think is a printed piece of cardboard inserted behind the see-through plastic. It does have the grid marks on it, like what Gipsy Danger has in the movie, but it is executed roughly, and I think the cardboard on my one might be stained, or maybe there's glue on it, but the impression that I get from looking at it is that it's just a big glob of mess behind the visor, and the effect of the hexagonal grid doesn't really show. The reactor portion here on the chest is also a little bit problematic in that it's too bright in the center. I might take a paintbrush to the center region because it looks better when you can't see the pinpoint light source of the LED, when the light is spread more around this ring here. I'm in a very bright room now, so to my naked eye it's easy to look at, but under normal lighting conditions this shows up as being too bright. Here's some pictures of the detailing on the back. And it's really the weathering that makes it look good. If this was a clean slate, just a shiny robot, I think that it would fare far worse than what it does, in my opinion. The weathering is what makes Neca's stuff passable. So they're not really that good at smooth surfaces. If we got a Bandai version of this, for example, I'd be really happy to see a clean look, but as long as it's Neca, I'm happy for them to stick with this weathering because it's really all they're good at. For posability, we've got this bit here, which does have a collision with the armor. If you watch the movie, you can see that the plates all move around each other, but it's quite limited. They've tried to put a bit of ratcheting in there, but the ratchets not that useful. Like, there's no ratchet in the backwards and forwards, it's just friction. There's a little bit of ratchet in and out. The whole joint section here, if you can see it, is a separate piece that's been glued into the torso, and I think with too much abuse it might actually pop out. No bicep swivel, and that is a real bummer because without a swivel here it suffers from the same problems as my Matty Voltron, that it limits the poses extremely. We've got elbow, which has a little bit of ratchet, but as time goes on it's getting worn off. Down at the wrist we're on a ball joint here with this big, nice looking hand. The hand itself has no articulation at all. It might look like it's got some, but no matter how you pull it, it will not come out. It's just one solid chunk. If you look up under the forearm, above the hand here, you can see that's the little slot where his weapon, his retractable sword, can plug in, and I'll get to that a little bit later. We have torso rotation here, as well as up and down of the top part of the chest. This groin area, what's not a groin, what is this, hip guard? On mine it seems a little bit uneven, like this top section is glued down into the bottom section and it just doesn't sit exactly right. The hips have these fake pistons in here which don't really do anything, but they do look pretty good. They're not actually attached up at the top here. I can stick my finger behind it. Now there is some ratcheting in the in and out of the hip which bangs into itself, stopping it from moving, but the ratchet is getting progressively weaker. When I first opened it, I could actually hear the ratcheting on this in and out, and now it's just so worn down, and I've only used it a few times. It's so worn down that I feel that given a bit more use, there will be no ratchet from side to side in the hip. Now we've got a clicky ratchet in the backwards and forwards hip swing, and again that is gradually wearing down. On the knee, more ratchet, not as clicky as the hip, and again it feels significantly looser now than when I opened it, and I've only played with this for maybe 20 minutes, so just be aware of it. You're not going to get a lot of play out of this. You should find a few poses and maybe leave it that way. Finally, down on the ankle, we've got a little bit of jiggle room on what feels like maybe some kind of mushroom peg into the bottom of the foot, bottom of the ankle rather, and this heel joint moves, and I tend to think that's just a coincidence of design and serves no real purpose. So there he is, Gipsy Danger. Pretty nice looking. So who else have I got around here for him to stand next to? I'm going to show him with a Kaiju. Not the Kaiju you were expecting. Here he is with Generations Titan Class Metroplex. My unstickered up version. I'm waiting for my repro labels for this guy. Slightly more ankle articulation than Metroplex. But other than that, Metroplex kind of beats this guy out for posability. I mentioned before that he comes with collapsible swords. Well, in the movie they're collapsible. In the toy they're just solid pieces. Here they are. That's one side. There's the other side. They're a bit bendy, relatively sharp along the edge. I've had to cut down the nub at the end quite significantly to get it to tab in. So you can see I've really hacked into it there. The one on the left has a total of 0 possibility of inserting into Gipsy Danger's forearm, and only when it gets cut down as much as the right have you got any hope. I did try putting a hairdryer on Gipsy Danger's arm first, and it got hotter and hotter, but it would not go in. So significant deformation in Gypsy's arm moulding just prevents that from happening. So one of the things to watch out for though is that if you're going to try and force this in by heating it up, this is a very weak connection in these little segments, and I almost snapped it in half. It seems to have survived without permanent damage, but it did quite sharply bend and stress. I thought I had ruined it. Let's plug it in now and have a look. Just going to grab this and stick it in, and still, even with it cut down, you have to be careful not to snap that while you're pushing it, because it just wants to buckle under that kind of force. There we have it. You can see it's quite long and it looks pretty good. I've heard complaints that it sags after time. I don't think it sags in the flat ways, in the plane of its width here. It doesn't sag this way, but if you had it maybe this way, it would sag. You can see it's already deformed that way to begin with. And I haven't also had it falling out. I've heard some people that if they have it in this position, it's fallen out of its own accord. Mine doesn't seem to suffer that much from that, but it could be because mine was so deformed that there's just extra pressure built up there. So there's not much else to say about it. I'm pretty happy with it. The only downside with owning this figure is that currently there are almost no Kaiju which you can get to scale to pose with him. I'm hoping that when we get the large 18-inch knife head from Neca, assuming that it actually comes out next year, that problem will be solved and we'll have a cool, massive display to pop on the shelf. He looks pretty good in static poses, and I think I can recommend this figure. I wouldn't recommend paying too much more than retail though. I just looked around until I ended up getting one, but they do go for significantly more on eBay. I think I could probably tolerate up to about $100 for this, but I wouldn't go any higher than that because it's just too limited in what you can actually do with it. This has been my video review for Neca's 18-inch Gipsy Danger from Pacific Rim. I'm Odeean. Thank you for watching.